You are a Locked On Braves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves postcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley and Jake Mastroianni with you after game one of a crucial, a pivotal, a must-win three-game series for the Atlanta Braves as they welcome the New York Mets to town, and the Braves did just that. It was must-win, and they picked it up behind rookie Spencer Schwellenbach, some timely offense, and the bullpen handling the rest. The Braves take the opener of this three-game set, and this final week, this mad dash to the finish, and what could be a photo finish in the wild card in a lot of different respects, got started with the win at Truist Park. We're going to talk all about that, take a look at the wild card at large, talk about some disappointing injury news from before the game, maybe some encouraging injury news from before the game, and, of course, get you set up for the second contest of this pivotal showdown with the New York Mets, which is scheduled to happen on Wednesday, weather permitting, and we'll get to that as well. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube, subscribe to Locked On Braves, wherever you get your podcasts as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today to get started. Well, the Braves had to get started with a win, and they need to follow that up with a win, and then that one with a win, and we know what the script has to be over this final week, Jake, but when you're putting together the recipe for how you win a baseball game in a pretty straightforward fashion, I'd say the Braves had it on Tuesday night at Truist Park between the good start, the timely offense, some nice plays defensively, a little bit of everything, and a 5-1 Braves win in the end.
In a week where you pretty much have to win just about every game, you come out and you play like this, and it certainly gives you some hope. I think it gives you a lot of momentum. Again, we'll talk about the weather. Hopefully that doesn't kind of diminish it. But again, you had to win a lot of these games, so certainly you want to win the first of those. But this was a great start for the Atlanta Braves. Just a great game overall. I thought one of the better played games of the year, especially considering the situation, and one of the more exciting games as a Braves fan to watch.
It sets the tone as well. And we've talked a lot this year, unfortunately, about the fact that sometimes it feels like this Braves team maybe plays down to the competition in some cases, not all the time, but there are just so many, losses that the Braves have this year that you look at and you think, really? How exactly did that happen? How'd you lose that series? How did it go from bad to worse in some cases? You just didn't know. But when it comes to playing teams that are in the playoff hunt or better than 500, the Braves seem to do pretty well in that regard. And this was just another case of that, perhaps the latest. The offense did its thing early on in support of Spencer Schwellenbach in this 5-1 victory. And I want to talk about all the hitting and all the things that went on. And a lot of it had to do with center fielder Michael Harris II, who had himself quite a night. But I think we got to start with the guy who got the ball in game one, most important start of his career. We've said that a lot about Spencer Schwellenbach, and we've also been able to say, Jake, that this kid delivered yet again.
He did. I mean, it's incredible. Again, I don't know what else to say about it. The guy has pitched in a ton of big games against some of those teams you just mentioned, playoff contenders, teams that are going to be in the postseason, and he's delivered every single time. And it's just incredible that we're talking about a rookie that hasn't been a starter very long, and everything that we talk about every time we talk about Spencer Schwellenbach. And yet here he is in the biggest game of the year, and every game going forward will be the next biggest game of the year for the Braves. But in this one, to start off, what's a huge week to just set the tone, like, as you said, on the mound, to come out there and deliver and give that type of performance. And what I thought was ultimately after that third inning, when the Braves scored a couple of runs and got on the board, to come back out there and then shut it down in the fourth inning. And at that point, it felt like it was game over after that with the way that he was pitching, especially once he got it to the back end. So, just great job by this rookie who just seems unfazed in these big moments against good teams. The Mets, as we talked about, one of the best teams in baseball over the last 3 or 4 months, and been playing really good. Just took 3 or 4 from the Phillies, and here he comes in and shuts them down in a game that the Braves absolutely had to have it.
Yeah, the moment has not been too big for Spencer Schwellenbach really at any point here. And it doesn't mean he's been perfect. It doesn't mean he hasn't had the occasional clunker of a start, which every starting pitcher in Major League Baseball is going to have. But the ability to move forward, make adjustments, come right back out there, and more times than not, just not only keep this club in the game, but do it so efficiently as well, and with a calm and a confidence that I think kind of he's beyond his years in that respect. And he's shown it off throughout the course of the season, as we've talked about so many times. I mean, you come into this year, you got 65 professional innings, about 30 some odd innings in college, and now you're looking at over 150 innings thrown over the course of this year, and he's still out there performing and just dotting the areas of the strike zone with multiple different offerings in different counts. The kid's simply not afraid to do what he needs to do against any lineup that is out there against him and to execute his game plan. And we'll talk a lot more about it as it goes along, but I just don't know that there was another place that you could start other than what Spencer Schwellenbach did in yet another opportunity to shine. He did just that, but of course, it hasn't really been the story of, well, if the pitching shows up, the Braves will be okay this year. It's been the opposite. It's been, well, can the offense back up some of the great pitching that Atlanta has gotten? And the answer on that one was also yes. The 5-1 victory over the Mets, which trims that wild card lead, by the way, down to one game with 5 to go. And of course, pending the Arizona outcome, we're not just looking at where the Mets are in this wild card picture, and we'll get to more of that later. Atlanta had to have this one. They have to have them all, honestly. But this, I felt like, was an inspired win for the Braves because they set the tone offensively, as you mentioned earlier. 3 runs in the third inning for him, then single runs in the fourth and fifth innings, just taking command. And other than a solo homer for the Mets in the 7th inning, they weren't able to get anything started. Meanwhile, for the Braves, they got their opportunity, they got their chance, they put Luis Severino on the ropes, and they delivered several shots rather than having some of these innings that we've seen where it seems like such promise and the Braves maybe just don't get enough. It didn't feel like that in this one in that third inning.
It didn't, and the Braves taking advantage of an opportunity there. Arcia gets it started with a swinging bunt. The ball's thrown away, and Arcia gets in scoring position with nobody out, and then back-to-back hits. And some good base running by Ozzie Albies in that inning, taking an extra base on the throw home, being able to get to third on that slow grounder by Ozuna. They just did a lot of things really well in that third inning to not just score 1 run, but to put up a crooked number and ultimately get 3. And I thought that hit by Laureano to get that third run across. You had a runner at third with 1 out. Soler, isn't unable to come through. He strikes out there. And I feel like if Severino's able to get out of that and only give up the 2 runs and leave that runner stranded, maybe that's a little bit of momentum back to them. But Laureano, who's come up big a lot over the last month or so, gets a clutch hit, pushes the ball the other way that he got jammed on, but finds a hole to score that third run. I thought that was huge in that inning. But again, not just to score 1, to put a big inning together, rack up those pitches for Severino and get him out of the game. I thought that was huge. And as you mentioned, then to be able to tack on a couple more after that. I mean, Schwellenbach didn't need much in this one, but again, it just helps always to get those tack on runs after you take that early lead.
Yeah, I mean, Severino was done in this game after 4 innings, 89 pitches. For comparison's sake, 7 innings, 87 pitches for Spencer Schwellenbach. I mean, that in and of itself, of the many storylines and things in this game, the Braves were able to work over the Mets starter, push him out of this one, get their bullpen in action early, because as much as these are must-win games for the Braves, it has to feel very much the same for the Mets because they want to put away the competition. They want to secure their spot in the postseason and not have to worry about this. And I know these aren't the same teams that did this in 2022, but man, it's hard not to think about that when it comes to that, battle-tested Braves club and maybe a Mets team that in some ways, I know they've got a couple of guys left from 2022 as well, but the Mets have to maybe feel like they're playing with house money because this wasn't really supposed to be a season where I feel like they were expecting to be where they are right now. Doesn't mean they don't belong, mind you, but I feel like that this is just one of those, or these two teams are coming together at pivotal times for both, where as much as we've talked about, I guess, that it's must win for the Braves, the Mets, they want to get this thing done. They want to push the Braves out, and they weren't able to do it on this night.
It almost feels like the roles have been reversed this season. The Braves came in talking about World Series or bust, but then with everything that happened, it's like, well, can the Braves just get to the postseason? And that would be considered a win if they can. And the Mets have gone on this huge run where it's like they almost expect to get in the postseason. And now maybe the pressure is a little bit on them. Obviously we talked about the Braves. They have to win pretty much every game the rest of the way. But to win the first game of this series is huge for a lot of reasons. One, I think it kind of plants that seed in the Mets' mind, like you mentioned, what happened a couple of years ago. And we don't know what's going to happen the next 2 games of this series, if they're going to play or not. So to be able to get that win to start this series was so big for the Atlanta Braves for what they need to accomplish.
Yeah, the weather does loom over the rest of this week, honestly, and we will talk about some of that later, but clearly, we're not meteorologists, and even when you are one, I think the weatherman sometimes is rather unpopular. We don't know how it's going to play out yet, but as far as getting and controlling what you could, Braves had a chance to win a baseball game on Tuesday. They did that. This offense, as I mentioned earlier, was powered by Michael Harris II in large part. He had 3 hits, including another home run for him. Marcell Ozuna also went deep, but what a day for Harris, who just seemed like from the very first at-bat on, when he had a 9-pitch at-bat that culminated with a single to lead things off for the Braves. I know they didn't score in the first inning, but it just kind of felt like, hey, maybe this is Michael Harris. There's really no question about it when you look over the last, couple of weeks now. He's in the zone now, Jake. He's feeling himself at the plate, and that's a great thing for the Braves, who need all the help they can get with this offense and getting it going and getting it consistent. And Harris couldn't have picked a better time.
And that guy set the table, like we talked about on the last postcast. I mean, he has 4 3-hit games in his last 5 games. And in between that, he had a 2-hit game in there as well. He's raised his average 20 points over a 5-game span. I mean, he's just on another level at the moment, what he's doing offensively, getting on base. Only thing I say, and I talk about it all the time, love to see some more steals in there as well, especially you're going up Alvarez, a guy that's has trouble throwing out base runners this season. But, I mean, Michael Harris, just unbelievable. That opposite field home run that he had was just a thing of beauty, 111.5 miles per hour off the bat. He just shoots it out left center, 422 feet. The guy's just absolutely locked in defensively as well. Another great catch that he does all the time. But, yeah, the Braves have needed other guys to step up. We've talked about it a lot outside of Ozuna and Olsen. Michael Harris has been one of those guys that has certainly delivered.
Yeah, and you're starting to talk about multiple hitters that are starting to get healthy at the plate. No pun intended whatsoever there, but starting to get the results that they need to get, want to get, and have been trying to get for quite some time, and doing so at a time that's crucial for the Braves as they take game 1 of the series against the Mets by a 5-1 score. We got a lot more to talk about. We'll get back into the start of Spencer Schwellenbach. We'll talk more about Michael Harris and the offense, and, of course, we'll get you set up for game 2 of the series. All of that is coming your way as the Braves postcast continues. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can also find the stadium stay that is just right for you. Well, Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all those rival cities as well. And Booking.com can help you book the stay that's close to your home team or your rival stadium. The choice is absolutely yours. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. From hotels that overlook stadiums to family-friendly resorts and cute bed and breakfast stays, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, booking.yeah. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Let's take a look at the box score and the line score of today's game. We'll start with the latter. Braves picking up that victory that makes them 86-71. Mets 87-70. So only one game in between these two rivals for a wild card spot. Mets just 1 run, 4 hits, 1 error. They left 5 men on base. Braves with 5 runs, 10 hits, 1 error, left 6 men on base. The winning pitcher in this one, Spencer Schwellenbach, is now 8-7 on the season. Luis Severino takes the loss, drops to 11-7 on the year. A very, very briskly played game as well. 2 hours and 16 minutes for the Braves to beat the Mets by that 5-1 score. And let's talk a little bit more about Spencer Schwellenbach, who, has been such a story for the Braves this season. I mean, there's certain players that I feel like we've talked about a lot. Spencer Schwellenbach's one. Chris Sale, Marcell Ozuna have certainly been on that list. But if you had to pick the one that maybe came out of nowhere to do what he's done, it's definitely going to be Spencer Schwellenbach, who has delivered time and again. And the decision to give him game 1 of this series, I will also say, Jake, that worked out quite well.
It did, and a lot of people questioning that, myself included, not because I don't believe in Schwellenbach, but just because I wanted to see Chris Sale potentially get 2 more starts. But again, you feel really good about Schwellenbach when he goes out there. He hasn't given you any reason to doubt him, even though he's well beyond what anybody thought he would throw innings-wise this year. He hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, and it's crazy. I talked about it earlier. I mean, he is a rookie, and you look at FanDuel right now and you look at their awards predictions. He's not even in their top 4, and there's been some really good rookies this year. But, I mean, what he has meant for this Braves team when they have needed it. Again, that 5th starter spot was something that they were struggling with early on, and he has come in and just – it was a little shaky early on, but after that, credit to the Braves for sticking with him and seeing what he could be. He has just been incredible. And like you said, just the one kind of unexpected that we didn't see coming. And it's crazy we're talking about a guy that's 24 and a guy that's 23 in Michael Harris that really led the charge on this night and have been leading the charge here over the last week or so. In case for Michael Harris, Schwellenbach for a while now. It's a couple of young guys on this Braves team that I think is better and laden with a lot of guys who've been in a lot of battles, but it's the two young kids that really carried him on this night.
And, I hadn't really thought about it, but I mean, we're in year 3 of Michael Harris, and Spencer Schwellenbach comes in a little bit longer in the tooth, but that just goes to show you how quickly and how young Michael Harris was when he established himself at the big leagues. And even for a guy that had to take a little bit of a longer route, I guess, going through the college ranks, having to deal with Tommy John surgery, the injury setback, but to find himself in the big leagues pretty quick, Spencer Schwellenbach is establishing himself quite well. And I don't think it was a confidence question about the call in game 1. And, a belief in Spencer Schwellenbach has to be there, like a lot of people believe in Joe Hendry. Spencer Schwellenbach, 7 innings of 1-run ball, 3 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, and the 1 home run in the 7th inning was really all that ruined what could have been a scoreless outing. But if ruining the outing is 7 innings of 1-run ball, then I'll take that every single time. Interesting stat I saw at the game today. Schwellenbach now has the most strikeouts by any pitcher in franchise history over their first 20 games, 122 of those. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, didn't we talk about the historic strikeout rate of Spencer Strider a couple of years ago? We did, but the time he spent in the bullpen kind of pushed him out of that particular statistical category. But however you want to slice it, whatever you want to look at, I mean, Spencer Schwellenbach has done himself quite well in these first 20 games. And it's crazy to think that way back in spring training, even though his name was high on the list of Braves prospects, you just really didn't expect him to be making an impact this year and to be setting a franchise record in really anything, if we're being honest. But he's certainly come along and done it, and the Braves are glad he has.
He has. A lot of that came in, last month where he had 42 strikeouts and 29 and 3rd innings. The strikeouts haven't quite been there as much in September, but obviously the results have still been there, and that's all that really matters. And this night is really interesting because he mainly just threw the fastball and slider that he primarily threw in this one. And I think he and Travis Arnaud just noticed, hey, that's all I needed. And then in that last inning, he finally breaks out the splitter and gets a strikeout to end his outing on that splitter. So, I mean, as good as he was, Grant, he was only using a couple of his pitches in this one. And again, I don't think it's a case that he didn't have the other ones. I just think he didn't necessarily need them in this one and just kind of saved him for maybe when he had a spot where he did have to throw him, but he never really had any pressure, never really had a need to go outside of that. So again, just continues to impress and get the job done and do it very efficiently, like you talked about earlier.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see the breakdown on that because watching from the ballpark, I saw Cutter come up on the board quite a few times, and that's obviously
that was his 3rd most pitch.
Yeah, so I saw that one quite a bit, but yeah, it was very heavy on. And sometimes when something's working, to your point, I mean, why overcomplicate matters and try to work in 3 or 4 other things if you've got a way to kind of carve your way through the lineup? And like you mentioned with the splitter, keep something in your back pocket for later when you do face that lineup, that 3rd or 4th time in some cases, so that they have something to think about that maybe they haven't dealt with before. And I think he's done a pretty nice job of that as well, but it's the efficiency for me that is giving him the opportunity to go deep in games. And the Braves certainly appreciate that because they don't have to overtax their bullpen, while on the other side, Mets bullpen had to cover 4 innings in this one. And that may not sound like a lot, but it starts to add up when day after day after day. And, Brian Snitker talked about this before the game. I mean, this has got to feel like the playoffs for pretty much every team that hasn't punched its ticket to October yet, especially when you're head-to-head with a team that could do damage to your chances of getting there. The playoffs pretty much for both these teams and others across the league have started officially this week, well in advance of the wild card round even getting going. Meanwhile, on Harris, an incredible run of success at the plate, triple shy of the cycle on Tuesday night, went 3 for 4, knocked in 2 runs, scored 2 more. He's batting .416 with 7 homers, 13 runs batted in, and 16 runs scored in his last 3 games. 8-game hitting streak overall, 5 straight multi-hit games. Jake, again, the timing of this for Harris is very, very fortuitous for the Atlanta Braves, who need somebody to be stepping up and igniting this lineup at the top, and Michael Harris is doing all that and more.
This is what the Braves have been missing all year. Look, Ozuna's kind of been your steady presence in the middle of the order. We talked about Matt Olson, who he's been steady for a month and a half. But what made the Braves lineup so special when healthy is that you could have guys up and down, even an Ozzie Albies, who they can get hot for a week or two, and they can be that supplemental piece with your steady guys in the order. The Braves haven't had that all year. It's been counting on just the ability of an Ozuna and Olson, but there's been nobody else that can really get hot and go off like this for a week or two at a time to just be that extra added offense to help you go from scoring 2-3 runs a game to 4, 5, 6 runs per game. And that's really just what this lineup has been missing without having all those key guys that are capable of doing that are so special, and these great talents like O'Reilly and Ozzie, Harris, obviously Acuna, not having those. Obviously, I'm preaching to everybody who knows this, but to have a guy like Michael Harris, as talented as he is, and to have him in the zone like this, as hot as he is, it just makes this lineup that much better.
It does. 16th home run of the year for him, 39th for Marcell Ozuna. That came in the 5th inning, absolutely crushed out to right field. Ozuna now has 102 runs batted in on the year. His average is now up to 310 as well. So we talked about Marcell slowing down a little bit in the power department. Well, he's still batting 310 on the season. He's still been picking up his hits. Also drew a walk in this game. He's still there, and if the power is starting to kind of come on back, then I don't think the Braves are going to be too upset about him choosing this week and beyond for the time to get that going again. Matt Olson had a hit and a walk in this game as well. The runs batted in, especially those that got Atlanta going in that 3-run inning against Luis Severino. Michael Harris II, obviously, Ozzie Albies, and Ramon Laureano getting all of that done. 3 runs in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, 1 in the 5th, and the Braves really never threatened by the Mets, who got just the solo home run from Vientos in the 7th inning to get them on the board and spoil the shutout for Atlanta. Mets with just 4 hits in this game, 1 for Iglesias, 1 for Luis Angel Acuna, and 2 belonging to Vientos, who again homered, and that was his 26th of the season. He's been a nice surprise player, I think, for the New York Mets as well. When we come back, we will talk a little bit about this wild card race, how things are shaping up, what's going on elsewhere, how it all affects the Braves. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do our best weatherman impression and figure out what in the world could go on this week. With those scenarios, there's not a lot of room for making these games up, and I don't know how creative they're going to get, but we'll see. And also, we got to talk a little bit about some injury news that came out before the game, as one more Brave is now officially done for the season. We'll tell you who as the Braves postcast continues. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Let's take a look at the wild card, Jake, because that is where we find ourselves in a very wild card kind of a race. The Braves trimmed that game off the Mets lead, took a step towards securing the tiebreaker, which is kind of that secondary, I don't know if goal is the right word, but it's definitely something worth thinking about when you consider the chaos that could occur in this wild card race over this final 5 games now after tonight. If the Braves take 2 out of 3, they will have secured the season series win over the Mets, but would still be a game out. And that, of course, pending the final series of the season. And we can get to that in a moment. It's also worth noting the Arizona Diamondbacks, who have had some real trouble here over the past couple of weeks, they got down big early to San Francisco. That game is not done, but Jake, it just begs the question, what could this look like, not just on Wednesday, but over the final 5 games for the Diamondbacks as well, who have been fading at the wrong time for them, but maybe a good time for the Braves and the Mets, who for so long we've kind of felt like maybe there's only one spot to come out of this 3-game series. That's not necessarily true.
It's not. Obviously, the Diamondbacks are there to be taken over as well. We just focus on the Mets because you control your destiny against them with those head-to-head matchups. But, yeah, the Giants want to keep taking care of business and knock out the Diamondbacks. The Braves own that head-to-head tiebreaker too, so that is another area where you can get in. The Diamondbacks down 10-0 right now, so the Braves could wake up on Wednesday morning just a half game back of a postseason spot. And so, again, Braves got to win. That's the bottom line to get in. You have to win no matter the competition and no matter whatever everybody else is doing. But certainly that is another path there for the Atlanta Braves if they want to get some more helps from the Giants. And then I believe it's the Padres that the Diamondbacks face in their final series too. So again, tough road here for the Diamondbacks to end the season.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of playoff teams that are all kind of overlapping here in this wild card race on this side. I haven't looked deeply into the American League side, but the Royals come over and play the Braves late. they've had some trouble with other teams in the American League Central, giving them a good push in that wild card. But yeah, that Padres Diamondback series, San Diego, in addition to having an opportunity to at least go head to head with the Dodgers for something in the National League West over the final, 6 total games for them as they're in action late on Tuesday night. That is intriguing. Could the Dodgers get pushed into the wild card picture if San Diego gets on an absolute roll over their final 6 games? I mean, those are part of the possibilities here, especially if either the Dodgers or the Diamondbacks fall flat on their face. That could change a lot of things. And then obviously you've got the Brewers who have clinched, but will have to play the Mets in that final series. So that's not necessarily going to be an easy one, though, depending on the Brewers getting locked into maybe that 3rd spot in the National League as far as the records for division winners. Maybe there's no tangible benefit whatsoever for them playing all their guys, but integrity of the schedule, you have to kind of look at the other teams and say, hey, we're at least trying to win these games. You don't want to be the club that, just throws a few gloves out there and plays your B team for the final 3 games. I don't think that would be the look you're going for. And most teams will not do that. They might rest a couple of guys, but they won't go the full-on route. And without the 40-man roster expansion, and maybe that's another thing Major League Baseball is going for here, you can't really just play an entire B team as easily these days as maybe you could in September's past.
Yeah, and Pat Murphy, manager of the Brewers, has already said, they didn't play very good when they let up, and that might cost them one of the buys.
Yeah,
because after they did clinch, they kind of let up a little bit and lost a couple of games there. That pretty much foregone at this point. They're 3 games back of both the Dodgers and the Phillies, so it might work against the Braves because the Padres pretty much have that top wild card spot locked up. Then maybe they don't need those last 3 games as much, and the Brewers, obviously have that clinched. They may not need those last 3 games as much, but either way, those are good teams that both the Diamondbacks and the Mets are going to have to face that are capable of putting up a fight. Like you said, if they go out there and with the integrity of the game and play to their level, those are going to be some tough contests. But as I said earlier, it comes down to the Braves, and they got to take care of business. They have everything in front of them to be able to do it on their own, and they keep playing like they did on Tuesday night. They're going to have a real good chance of doing that.
Yeah, because there are just so many other teams, and including these head-to-head battles in some cases, particularly the one that they've got right now, none bigger than the one with the Mets. There is that opportunity to do a lot of your own heavy lifting and not have to rely on 2 or 3 other outcomes to be favorable for you to sneak your way into October. But it is going to be fascinating to see what this next 5 days looks like. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the weather, which may not be looking so great on Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Friday as well, from what I've been seeing. I've heard just conflicting reports, all of it basically saying that it's not going to be a very fun storm, maybe up to 2 to 3 inches of rain on Wednesday. Those are not baseball conditions from my experience, even in Florida. That's not good baseball weather. So it will be fascinating, Jake, to see exactly what they do here, because you have, 1 day as a buffer between the end of the regular season and the start of this wild card series. You don't want to be making up multiple games on 1 day, do you?
You don't. At the very least, I think you have to try to find a way to get 1 more of these games in against the Mets. And then if you have to make one up on Monday, you do so. Certainly don't want to make up more than that. And that, if they do get just 1 more game in, it becomes very key for the Braves, because if they win it, then they own that season series. And then if you're up 1 game, and maybe that Monday game's not needed. Again, we're speaking best case scenarios here, but again, all these games are very important. But to clinch that season series, it becomes very important for either team.
Yeah, but that game could be important to maybe the Diamondbacks. I don't know. Like, you could get hopelessly entangled in some of these other scenarios, which we're not going to be able to solve before the show comes to a close. And unfortunately, we have to talk about something that I think may have been, in the minds of many Braves fans, possibly a foregone conclusion. Austin Riley's season is over. He had a CT scan on Monday that revealed that his hand has just not healed to the point where he can resume baseball activities and realistically be back this season. So his season is done, according to Brian Snitker. That news before the game. Unfortunate, but not unforeseen, Jake. I know Austin Riley wanted to try it if he could, but discretion is the better part of valor here. No point in taking an injury and trying to push it and potentially making it worse or re-injuring yourself. So next time we see Austin Riley on the field, sounds like that's going to be spring training.
Yeah, just kind of always felt like this was going to be the case. Kind of similar to Ozzy, where we were all kind of hoping best case scenario, he's back first month of September. That, again, was best case, but never seemed very likely. And same here with Austin Riley. Best case, maybe he'd be back for first round of the playoffs or something like that. But it was always more realistic that he was going to be done for the season.
Yeah, because, with Ozzy, at least 6 to 8 weeks, when you're talking about late July, you can look at it and think, well, maybe this timetable works out. But when it was the middle of August and Austin Riley got hurt and you heard 6 to 8 weeks, and it just didn't seem like that was going to happen. But, I also watched Freddie Freeman break his wrist and come back in a ridiculously fast time and with little to no time in the minor leagues and playing a different position, which the Braves were not going to ask Austin Riley to do. But be that as it may, unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make it back. Some good news, though. Reynaldo Lopez to a side session on Tuesday. Looked great, felt great. We'll see. He can return, in 2 days, and we'll see how that could factor into the Royals series as far as a starting role. Obviously, he's got plenty of experience in relief as well. If the Braves just kind of wanted to utilize him as a weapon in the final 3 regular season games and then figure out if they line him up for a postseason start, the bottom line is you wanted to get a good report, and it sounds like the Braves did on Reynaldo Lopez.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility, or maybe you could start him and piggyback him with Grant Holmes, and maybe both of those guys get you through 5-6 innings in a game. So it kind of opens up the door for that potentially, like you said, in that Royal series.
All right, game 2 of this series. Chris Sale, 18-3, 2.38 ERA against David Peterson, fellow left-hander. He's 9-3 with a 3.08. 7:20 p.m. Eastern time is the scheduled first pitch, weather permitting, at Truist Park on Wednesday. We don't have a ton of time left, and I feel like we've spent adequate amount of time this year, Jake, talking about how great Chris Sale has been. They gave him the extra day so that he could be, Brian Snitker said before the game, the best version of himself, which sounds delightful. And the Braves would love to see that against the New York Mets. And Sale, you talk about somebody who's been delivering all season long. This is the guy probably in all of Major League Baseball and could be closing out a Cy Young campaign.
Could be his last start in what is ultimately Cy Young campaign here, last regular season start. Hopefully there's more to come. But as we talked about, he has delivered just about each and every time for the Braves this year. So looking for that again. And hopefully, like I said, the Braves can go ahead and clinch this series, which would be huge to get that tiebreaker.
Well, hopefully we can get this game in against the inclement weather that is expected to hit the Atlanta area. Is going to be rolling in on Wednesday and could affect things throughout the course of the week. We will, of course, be back to keep you posted on what does happen on the field as the Braves and Mets resume this series. Game 2, Chris Sale, David Peterson, 7:20 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday is the scheduled first pitch. That brings us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. As always, we appreciate you riding along with us. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube and Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. Once again, the Braves take a big step towards securing a spot in the postseason by taking Game 1 over the New York Mets. 2 more games in this series to go, and we will catch you next time. Until then, so long, everyone.